Greetings. Today I'm reading a book called David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. I've read quite a few books by Malcolm Gladwell. He is a brilliant author. His books are amazing. They challenge the way you think, challenge some of your own personal stereotypes or outlooks in life. He's a really good author and I've really enjoyed all his books. I really recommend it. He was international bestseller a couple of times, I believe, with one of his books called Outliers. That was a really good book. I was looking for my copy, I can't find it, otherwise I'd have reviewed that book, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. So I recommend that book as well. But today I'll be reviewing David and Goliath. I usually only read one page. Today I want to read 2 pages. Also, as well, I just want to say sometimes I do pronounce my words wrong, and what I would put that down to is when I was young and I used to read a lot, I just used to be off in the corner reading a book, and because I'm reading a book, people just leave me alone because I'm with the book. I'm not bothering anybody. I'm staying out of trouble. I'm just reading a book, so people just leave me alone to read a book. One thing that I would say though is because I wasn't reading aloud, I was just reading to myself, there were some words that I never learned to pronounce. So because I was reading to myself, silent reading, when it got to a word that I didn't know how to pronounce, it wasn't flagged up anywhere because I was reading to myself. So perhaps parents that have children, try and have them read aloud so you can actually hear what they're saying and how they're pronouncing their words. Sometimes I'll be reading and I'll say a word and people think I'm joking. They'll be like, what did you say? It's like, oh yeah, vegetables. They're like, vegetables. I'm like, oh. So yeah, excuse me for any words that I don't pronounce properly, but even though I love books and I've always read a lot, some words I just never learnt to pronounce because I didn't even know I was saying it wrong because I was reading to myself. Right. The page I'll be reading is page 121. David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. He headed to the commodities exchange, which was part of the old World Trade Center complex. I think I'm going to get a job, he said, but there's nowhere to go. It's all secure. So I go up to the observation deck and watch the guys and think, can I talk to them? Then I walk down to the floor with the security gate and stand at the security gate like someone's going to let me in. Of course, no one is. And then, literally, right after the market's closed, I see this pretty well-dressed guy running off the floor, yelling to his clerk, I've got to go. I'm running to LaGuardia. I'm late. I'll call you when I get to the airport. I jump in the elevator and I say, I hear you're going to LaGuardia. He says, yeah. I say, can we share a cab? He says, sure. I think this is awesome. With Friday afternoon traffic, I can spend the next hour in the taxi getting a job. The stranger Con had jumped into the cab with happened to be high up at one of Wall Street's big brokerage firms, and just that week the firm had opened a business buying and selling options. The guy was running the options business but did not know what an option was, Con went on. He was laughing at the sheer audacity of it all. I lied to him all the way to the airport. When he said, do you know what an option is? I said, of course I do. I know everything. I can do anything for you. Basically, by the time we got out of the taxi, I had his number. He said, call me Monday. I called him Monday, flew back to New York Tuesday or Wednesday, had an interview, and started working the next Monday. In that period of time, I read Macmillan's Options as a Strategic Investment book. It's like the Bible of options trading. It wasn't easy, of course, since Con estimates that on a good day it takes him 6 hours to read 22 pages. He buried himself in the book, working his way through one word at a time, repeating sentences until he was sure he understood them. When he started at work, he was ready. I literally stood behind him and said, buy those, sell those, sell those. Con said. I never owned up to him what I did. Or maybe he figured it out, but he didn't care. I made him tons of money. Con isn't ashamed of his beginnings on Wall Street, but it would be a mistake at the same time to say that he's proud of them. He's smart enough to know that a story about bluffing your way into your first job isn't altogether flattering. He told it instead in the spirit of honesty. It was, this is who I am. Con was required in that taxi ride to play a role, to pretend to be an experienced options trader when in fact he was not. Most of us would have foundered in that situation. We aren't used to playing someone other than ourselves, but Con had been playing someone other than himself since elementary school. You know what it's like. You're a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old kid and you're in a public school setting and everyone thinks you're an idiot. So you try and do funny things to try and create some social esteem. Better to play the clown than to be thought of as an idiot. And if you've been pretending to be someone else your whole life, how hard is it to bluff your way through a 1-hour cab ride to LaGuardia? More important, most of us wouldn't have jumped in that cab because we would have worried about the potential social consequences. The Wall Street guy could have seen right through us and told everyone else on Wall Street that there's a kid out there posing as an options trader. Where would we be then? We could get tossed out of the cab. We could go home and realize that option trading is over our heads. We could show up on Monday morning and make fools of ourselves. We could get found out a week or a month later and get fired. Jumping in the cab was a disagreeable act. And most of us are inclined to be agreeable. But Con, he was selling aluminium siding. His mother thought that he would be lucky to end up a truck driver. He had been kicked out of schools and dismissed as an idiot. And even as an adult, it took him 6 hours to read 22 pages because he had to work his way word by word to make sure he understood what he was reading. He had nothing to lose. My upbringing allowed me to be comfortable with failure, he said. The one trait in a lot of dyslexic people I know is that by the time we get out of college, our ability to deal with failure was very highly developed. And so we look at most situations and see much more of the upside than the downside because we're so accustomed to the downside. It doesn't faze us. I've thought about it many times. I really have, because it's defined who I am. I wouldn't be where I am today without my dyslexia. I never would have taken that first chance. Dyslexia, in the best of cases, forces you to develop skills that might otherwise have lain dormant. It also forces you to do things that you might otherwise never have considered, like doing your own version of Kamprad's disagreeable trip to Poland, or hopping in the cab of someone you never met and pretending to be someone you aren't. Kamprad, in case you're wondering, is dyslexic, and Gary Con, it turns out he was a really good trader, and it turns out that learning how to deal with the possibility of failure is really good preparation for a career in the business world. Today, he's the president of Goldman Sachs. Right, so that was pages 121, 122, 123, 124. So there's a lot to unpack there. A young guy's blabbed his way into a job on Wall Street in New York, and he's ended up, how many years later, being the president of Goldman Sachs. And as we read there, he was saying that being dyslexic and people just not having high expectations of him all helped him to become confident, which is really interesting. which is really, really interesting. So he was just willing to risk a lot more than perhaps the average person, because he was just used to people not expecting much from him. And being dyslexic, I think only recently that people have started to understand it, accept it. A disadvantage in life can end up being an advantage. So things that may be character building could in the end actually save you. So I really recommend the book David and Goliath. His previous book Outliers, I'm not sure if I'm saying it properly, but Malcolm Gladwell is the author. Brilliant books, brilliant books, and I hope you enjoyed it. This one is David and Goliath, and also as well, it makes me think of situations recently where some Uber drivers that took them to court in England, and they won the case. And in winning the case against Uber, they actually changed employment history in England. So they actually had the impact on employment history. And it's that type of book, just looking at where somebody that isn't obviously going to succeed go up against a giant and actually is very successful. So that's David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. Hope you enjoyed the review, and his other book, Outliers, that's really good as well. Thank you.